Hey, let's talk about God today. I promised, and I think a couple of previous videos, that I would talk about God. And what I've sensed and what I have seen with my mind's eye about this amazing entity to whom we owe everything. Right. So how do I begin? Let's say, well, not let's say, because this is the truth. We're not going to just say it, we're going to state it. So, I grew up in a religious family. And I was religious myself, went to church regularly, and read my Bible. And I just want to make it clear, as I think I've made it in other videos, that if that's the way you want to live your life, it's perfectly fine. You know, go on doing it. It's a good practice. It makes a lot of people better. It helps them connect with God on some level, and that's great. That's great. It changes most people's behavior for the better. There are also a lot of bad things that happen with churches and church going, and people in churches, and people in leadership positions in churches, and people who handle the money that comes into churches, and so on and so forth. And you can just, even as heavily censored as history is, you can look through the history that's available in textbooks, and you can readily see the dangers that are immediately apparent with giving churches too much power, both financial and governmental or leadership power. It's just not a good idea. So the separation of church and state is a very good thing. But I want to make this video not about churches. I want to make this about God. So this that was just a bit of a preamble, an introduction to where I'm coming from. So for most of my life, I went to church and I read my Bible, and it was good, but I felt I needed more. I felt that the connection that I had with God, or the connection that I was getting from all this church going, was actually taking me further away from God into some sort of a ritualistic, ceremonial, rote behavior, where I wasn't really getting the connection that I wanted. And intuitively, I felt that God was not about this kind of stuff. God was much, much more. And I got to the point where I just didn't stop going to church altogether. And both me and my wife, because thankfully we're on the same page, and that's vitally important in a marriage. You don't want to be on different pages or to have one pulling in the other direction, because that gets you nowhere. So my wife and I talked about this in great deal, and many times, and we decided together to take this other path, which was cutting off our ties with the churches and going to church and that sort of stuff. I'm trying to think of how to put this, how to say it. Because, as you know, most of my videos are unscripted, so I talk about these things as they come to me when I sit down and press record on the camera. I don't rehearse this stuff. And that's, I think, the truest kind of message that you can give, is you simply sit down and you talk honestly and directly about the topic at hand. So how do I put this? With religion, with any religion, I believe that you get to see God through, well, no, you don't get to see God. You get to see a facet of God. A facet that is quite limited. And it has to be that way because the infinite, that is God, that is the source, cannot fit within religious dogma. It simply cannot. And so the imagery that I came up with, it is a slice of the pie. Could be a pizza pie, could be apple cobbler. It doesn't matter really. But every religion just gives you a little slice of the pie. And you don't get the whole pie. And this is not about greed or hunger, right? You just want to get a full expression of what God is. And I don't know that as humans we can ever fully comprehend what God is. But what I do know is that the picture that you get of God through the eyes of religion is quite limited. It's quite dim. It filters down through the many steps of censorship of that church, of that particular church, so that it fits within their dogma. And the purpose of religious dogma is not to establish your own personal relationship with God. The purpose of religious dogma is to build up and develop and carry forward the institution that is that church. That's the purpose of dogma, of religious dogma. And look, I'm talking about churches again. I promised this video was going to be about God. I'm sorry. But the two are kind of intertwined, right? In the world that we live, most people have come to expect that in order to find God, you have to go into a religion, and it's not the case at all. You don't have to join anything. You don't have to shave your head and go live in a monastery somewhere, whether it's in the East or in the West. You don't have to get baptized. You don't have to go to any priest to confess anything. You don't have to give any money to anybody. Because that concept in itself is absolutely ridiculous, and perhaps it deserves a separate video, I don't know. But yeah. So, intuitively, I knew that I just wasn't getting the connection to God that I wanted, and I didn't know how to get it, but I knew that it wasn't going to happen by doing the same things that I'd been doing since I was a little boy. So I had to change things up. And I began to read a lot of other things. I began to look for another way to connect to God. Meditation, various texts, various other teachings. And it just wasn't happening the way I wanted it. So I thought, well, probably just gonna have to live my life, the rest of my life, with this frustration, because I know that after I die, of course, then I'm gonna get a fuller understanding of what God is, or who He, it, the entity called God is. Obviously, after death, you get to meet your Maker, as they say. But intuitively, I knew that God didn't care whether I wanted to go to church or not, or He did not care. I refer to God in, as a He, but obviously God is not a he or a she. God simply is. He is the origin of everything, and the universe that we live in is actually inside God. He is in it. He is it. We are in Him, or in God. It's a very weird concept for those of us who grew up in church, where we were taught that God is this old guy with a beard that sits on a throne and goes like, you better do this or else. So He doesn't care what day of the week you go to church. It's simply not important to the real God. He does not care that you wear certain underwear, as some religions apparently require. He does not care that you build a church to Him, or a temple to Him, or a monument to Him. And He does not care for people begging Him for stuff. That plaintive tone that is used by the overwhelming majority of people to pray to God. Oh, God, give me this, God, give me that. That's not interested in that. He does not want people worshiping Him. He does not require it. He does not care if you want to waste your life worshiping other gods. He cares very little whether you make a graven image of Him or you don't. Frankly, it'd be silly, because you cannot put God in the shape of anything. God does not have a shape. God does not have a gender. If anything, in my own estimation, making a graven image of God, or calling God by a certain gender, even though I refer to God as a him, there's no gender there. God is an entity that cannot be defined. He is the infinite. And so whenever you try to limit God by pigeonholing Him into something, you are limiting your own understanding of Him, of God. I keep saying, third person male, but He's not. He's simply is. It's very difficult to express with human language what God is. So that was my intuitive understanding of God. And then I did something that really opened my eyes, and something that I definitely recommend that you do if you can find a good practitioner. And this is regression therapy, or regression hypnotherapy. If it's done right, it can really open your eyes to the reality that's out there. And I mentioned this in past videos as well, in passing, and maybe I'll make a separate video about this, but I wanted to talk about it now because it is the thing that helped me understand not only who I am, but who God is, or what God is. And so I've said all of those things to get to this part of the video, and I hope that you're still watching, because this is when it should get interesting. But I needed to go through that stuff so I could get here. because that was my journey. So I needed to take you through it. And I'm not rushing through this, because there's no point in rushing to find out who God is, or what He is, or what God is. Rushing it would be a folly. You just have to take your time. And once you get a glimpse of that, you have to sit there still and just take it all in. So I did the regression therapy sessions, and I got glimpses of God. And I wish you could see what I saw. It's pretty amazing. Now, I said that God is the whole universe, and that's true. God is the whole universe. The entity called God, or called the Source, is at the origin and is in the fiber of everything. So, when some religions teach that God is omnipresent, that teaching is correct, although their understanding of it is incorrect. God is omnipresent because He is literally in everything, everywhere, all around you, in you. Your very soul originated from God, broke off, individuated from God. The very energy that powers you is part of God. It fills the universe. Everything that exists is of God. That entity, the Source, created everything. I exist here because of God. You are watching this because of God. Everything around you, including this camera, the internet, all of it was inspired by God. Then we get into the question of, okay, but there's evil in the world. That's true, there is. It's because of free will. It's because each of us is truly free to choose to do whatever we want with what we've been given. In whatever plane of existence we are, whatever density, does not matter. God never dictates how you should be, how you should live your life. He never says you must do this, you must do that. Each of us chooses for ourselves. And we can actively choose to do good or to do bad, or to simply be indifferent to these things, to stand aside as we watch both good things and bad things happening in front of us. I don't want to say that God is neutral. because I want to make it very clear that there are always consequences for what we choose to do. Immutable consequences for some of the things, both good consequences and bad consequences. So the concept of sin that we're taught in world religions is, well, I just want to say right off the bat, it's a corruption. And it was corrupted specifically with the purpose of extorting money from people, making them feel guilty, and empowering the church's authority over them. That's, right off the bat, that's why that exists. But the concept of sin in general is a misunderstanding or an unclear concept of how God views these things. Because, like I said, we all get to choose what we do. And there are consequences. But God does not view what we do as a sin. No, He views it as a mistake. And in the case of the really bad stuff, as a crime against humanity, a crime against your fellow man and woman, or a crime against nature, a crime against the concept of free will. You know, when you force evil things upon entire populations. So those are the bad things that you definitely get punished for. And the way the punishment works, from my understanding of it, obviously, from what I've seen and from what I've learned so far and what seems to be intuitively right to me, is that you get punished both in this life and you get punished in the afterlife. So there is such a place as hell. Let's say there are multiple realms of hell, from what I've seen during my regression therapy sessions. And you get punished there as well. And then you also, if you did some really bad stuff, you also get punished in your future life or future lives. How many lives you end up being punished in, I don't know, but it definitely happens for some. So the punishment is there, make no mistake about it. Those of you who are taught by some religions or some groups, such as some secret societies or some other fancy secret clubs that or nasty little churches, such as the Church of Satan, for example, which is quite popular these days, that you can do what thou wilt and there is no punishment. Oh. The hell that you're letting yourself in for when you when you do that kind of stuff, thinking you won't get punished. That's, oh my God. You just wait and see. Yeah. I don't know if I can find it, in some of the old Looney Tunes cartoons, or was it in the Tom and Jerry cartoons? In one of them there's a gag where something bad happens, and the other one is supposed to, or wants to partake in the same kind of advice and end up the same way, and a voice tunes in from somewhere off camera, goes, "Don't you believe it?" And just imagine that voice talking to you when you're about to do some bad shit, based on the advice that some of these corrupt organizations and cults and societies want to give you. Yeah. So let me share what I saw of God in one of these regression therapy sessions, because it's I did get a glimpse of this infinite entity called God. Well, a mental glimpse, right? It was a mental image that I saw for a short while, but it's going to stay with me for the rest of my life because it's quite amazing. So, as I said earlier, even though God is the universe, right? The universe is actually inside God. Whether you want to imagine the universe as being inside God's body or inside God's mind, it doesn't really matter, because God does not have a body. God does not have a face, does not have a gender, does not have a name. The name God is something that we choose to name, or we choose to call that entity. We choose to call that infinite God or a source. But there is no way to call or look at or observe that which is God, because it defies any of the human concepts. I mean, if you can imagine, out of the trillions of galaxies that are out there, each of them with who knows how many solar systems in them, and in those solar systems, who knows how many planets, and on those planets, who knows how many species, and each of those species has their own way of understanding God. How can any of those species possibly refer to God? And is any of those understandings all-encompassing? The obvious answer is no, cannot be. So, the universe is God, God is the universe. But at the center of it all, and I don't know if it's a geographic center or if it's the center, the origin of it all, there sits a point. Don't imagine this to be a speck, right? It's a point, a central point, or a hub, if you will, through which everything passes. And that's what I saw. There's a concentrated presence there. And you cannot describe it, because you simply cannot describe it. But at the center of it all, there is a being, an entity, a concentration of energy, obviously with consciousness, obviously. I mean, it is the God consciousness, right? And I'm trying to describe that to you, but again, language fails me. You simply, when you see that image, you simply are awestruck. And you just sit there, and during the regression therapy sessions, you have your eyes closed, and you sit there and you're just like, oh my God. You take it all in. You cannot believe that you're actually getting a glimpse of God. And so at the center, there is this entity. Language fails me, I'm sorry. And you know right away that is God. You know right away that is the point in the universe where God resides, or where the consciousness of God is concentrated. Because again, remember, you are within God. The universe is within God. The universe is God. God is the universe. But at that point, you can call that concentration of consciousness and energy God. And the sensations that you feel when you look at that are just amazing. You feel this incredible peace and safety and love, but most of all a calm that surpasses any sort of calm that you've ever felt before. And this love, this parent-like love, this fatherly love that is more than anything you've ever possibly felt. Just love and understanding, and it's like God wants to hug you. If you can imagine an entity that surpasses all understanding, without hands, without a body, but you feel hugged. You feel just, oh, can I stay here forever? And it's that sort of a feeling. And you know how some religions describe God as, sitting on a throne and with the glory of angels and all that stuff, the angels defending him left and right and singing praises and blah, 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 blah. No. No. No one needs to protect God. God is never under any personal attack from anything. That would be, it's just, no. There is no throne. There is no so-called Shekinah, right, that glory of God. There are no angels waving their wings around him and singing praises and there is just God, and that's all that ever needs to be. It is more than enough. It is the infinite. God is never under any threat from anything. Cannot be. Just perfect balance, perfect understanding. Perfect love, perfect justice, perfect infinite everything. I wish you could see what I saw. Because then you can go on with your life, the rest of your life, knowing that everything's going to be okay. No matter what happens in this silly worlds that we revolve in, everything's going to be fine. Everything's going to be just fine. So, yeah. God does not give commandments. He does not require sacrifices, animal sacrifices, or no. I think Jesus probably said it best when he said that the only sacrifice that God requires is a contrite heart. So true. So true. Did you do something bad? Just be sorry, genuinely, and don't do it again. That's it. Don't need to go confess it to anybody. You don't need to go pay anybody to do anything for you. You don't need to go walk on your knees to some stupid statue somewhere. Ugh. You don't need to kill any innocent animal for it. Just be genuinely sorry. Don't do it again. Try to lead a good life. That's it. Don't worry too much about the punishment. If you did something truly bad, it's going to be coming. Don't compound your errors by doing more of the same shit. Just try to lead a good life, and don't worry, the punishment will be perfectly just. And it's going to be meant to save you, not to punish you necessarily. If in any way it's going to be possible to bring you back to a state of grace or a state of balance as a soul, all attempts will be made. Now, if it's not possible for somebody that was truly, truly evil, then that soul is just going to end up being destroyed. But as far as I know, efforts are made even over millennia. Well, time is a concept that applies to our human understanding, right? But in the afterlife, there's no time, so to speak. But you can perhaps assign a sort of measurement to it and say, even if you have to spend millennia in hell, attempts will be made time and time again to restore your soul, to bring you back to normal. And it may take tens of lifetimes. It may take hundreds of lives, but attempts are always made. And only in the cases where it's not possible, then that soul is either allowed to regress all the way to the point of nothingness, or just outright destroyed, but very seldom happens, from what I know. So, you don't need to sing songs of praises to God, get together in church and go through the same tired old hymns thinking that God requires it. God does not require anything from anybody. Nothing whatsoever. Does not even require that you lead a good life. He desires it. He wishes it. He wishes that you use your soul and your life wisely, because they are precious. They come from Him, but does not require it. God does not care that you wear special underwear. Does not get offended if you don't wear tidy whities, it's... He does not get offended if women don't cover their head in church or their face. Doesn't even get offended if women dress like hussies when they go to church. And in a lot of Christian churches, women definitely dress too provocatively when they go to church. But does not get offended about that. He's fully understanding of it and hopes that you can do better. God doesn't get offended if you don't give alms to the poor. A lot of the so-called poor are actually grifters whose job it is to beg. And they actually have more money than you think. And a lot of people who give money to the poor actually give it in order to feel better about themselves and to make amends for all the crappy and horrible things they do in business and in their private time. So that's no measure of a man, and it's certainly not a requirement of God's. God does not require your prayers. Certainly doesn't want you wailing to Him, begging Him for things. As a child of God, you have access to everything. Now, if you don't have everything, perhaps you're not ready for it. Perhaps you're not asking the right way. Perhaps you're not putting in the work. Or perhaps simply the way that the world works is unjust, and the resources that people should have are out of reach for them because there are too many greedy people in the world who are hoarding everything. And that's certainly the case in today's world. You have so much hoarding of everything. These ultra-rich, greedy pigs for whom nothing is ever good enough and nothing is ever enough. They just want more, 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 more. Governments want more money. They want to exert control to the point of suffocating the people. And you have these rich owners of corporations and stockholders in corporations and corporate boards and huge corporate entities who just want to squeeze people out of everything. So perhaps that's why your life isn't equitable. Perhaps that's why your living conditions are not good enough. Don't blame God for it. Yeah. Don't look to God for everything. God already gave you everything. Look to your fellow human being. Look to the way the world is run. Don't blame God. And remember that the concept of free will is always at work. And that punishment, just punishment, is always forthcoming for those who deserve it. But if you want to improve the living conditions in the world during your lifetime, then you've got to look to the people. Look to the people who are put in charge of representing you and your fellow humans in local governments, in regional governments, in national governments, in international governments. Look to them. Why aren't they doing their jobs? Why are they so corrupt? Why are they all working together to plot against the normal, hard-working, honest people? They're to blame, not God. So this video is already fairly long. What am I at right now? I'm at it's 50 minutes, something like 50 something minutes now. So I don't know how many of you are watching at this point. But I made this longer than usual because I wanted to give you as much information as I could on this topic. And I truly hope that this helps you. I know that it helped me so much. And yes, I talk slowly in these videos because, well, not because I talk like this all the time. No, I talk like this in these videos because I'm trying to calm you down as you watch. So, yeah, I'm trying to transmit a bit of peace to you. So that's why I talk like this in these videos. And I'm trying to explain things in a way that registers. Even though the concepts may be difficult at times to communicate. I'm hoping that by approaching them from different angles and talking slowly, that it's going to be easier for you to understand them. So I encourage you to do some regression therapy or regression hypnotherapy. Regression therapy is done without hypnosis. It's not as common as regression hypnotherapy, but both are kind of useful. Well, kind of useful. They're vitally useful, I think, in opening your eyes to a lot of interesting things. Helping you to pierce through that thick veil that covers us when we are in this density, in this dimension, in this world. So I encourage you to find a practitioner of these two, or different practitioners of these two, and to not be afraid to ask to see God. You have every right. God will not reject you. Ask to see God. Ask to talk to God in these sessions. And find somebody who's, for goodness sake, somebody who charges decent prices. Because I've seen some of these practitioners charge an arm and a leg. And Look, everyone's got bills to pay in this world, right? In this screwed up financial system where everyone's got mortgages and loans and bills, and we're just loaded up to our eyeballs in this financial slavery. Everyone's got bills to pay, so I understand that you have to charge something. But find somebody who charges decent prices, not ridiculous prices. I've seen some people charge as much as $400, $500, $600 or more, $600 or more for a session. And that's insane. That's crazy. It's not right, because God doesn't charge you anything. Your higher soul doesn't charge you anything to connect to them. They don't go, your credit card's rejected, I can't talk to you right now, come back later, you know. It's free. It's all free. So the only thing that's costing anything is the time of that practitioner. And I wish that they would charge decent prices for their time. So yeah, I encourage you to try to see God for yourselves, and to talk to God, to get a better connection to the Creator, to the Source, because it gives you a whole new understanding of life and of the universe. That's wonderful, really. Trying to remember if there's something I've forgotten to say. I'll say it in another video if I've forgotten something. Yeah. Thanks for watching. Till next time.